Framelines talks to Justin Russell about his new movie, The Sleeper, shot in Central Ohio.
These girls. Hello? 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 Who is this?
Cindy's first.
Bobby, is that you? Bobby, you've got to stop prank calling this line. Do you hear me?
Cindy's first.
Bobby? Cindy.
Yeah?
Bobby called again and is being lewd. Can you please tell him to stop calling?
I have. I'll tell him again.
I got started with filmmaking when I was really young, probably about 12 or 13. I started making movies with my dad's old video camera, just a Hi8 camera that I would take out and make little zombie films, little G.I. Joe movies and stuff like that. The Sleeper originated more or less in the middle of the night. I woke up in my bedroom and my door was open and I was like, man, I could have swore that I had shut that door. And then I got thinking just late at night, you know, you start just spiraling ideas. And I thought that would be really creepy if somebody came in to your room while you were sleeping at night and then just kind of killed you. I was like, that's not really been done before. It's like a killing somebody in your sleep kind of idea, especially for a slasher movie. And I thought, wow, that'd be a really awesome lost 80s slasher movie. I grew up with like 80s horror films more or less. After I was a little bit young for when they first came out, but kind of got into them after the fact. It's not really that I was into the horror element. I was into more of the atmosphere and the ambience of the genre at that time. More or less, the 80s films had something different that horror films don't have today. Just a style that I think has been lost in filmmaking. That's why I kind of want to bring that 80s style back. Current horror is cheaper almost. What they decide to do with the audience is they take it a different way. The 80s horror films were sort of campy and fun, but at the same time there was elements of horror that would scare people. But the new style of horror is more of like cheap scares, quick little things that they'll throw in there, sound bites, because sound has come such a long way from the 80s that sound design is a huge play on horror films nowadays. So some of the beauty of the 80s horror films was they were so cheaply made, and it was just a group of people that would go out and make this little movie and just try their best. The great example would be Nightmare on Elm Street. And they just went out and they just believed in this idea, and they made it probably one of the most creepy films of that era, I would say. I shot The Sleeper in Springfield, Ohio, and we shot it in February of earlier this year. Principal photography was about 13 days. For this film, as most of my films are, I always write the film and then I produce, direct, shoot, edit, and score the films. The size of the crew was relatively small. We didn't have a lot of money, obviously. It was a very low budget shoot. We pretty much had, I think, about 10 people total. Cole Pisano was my gaffer and key grip and was an enormous help during the shoot. Dana Jackson, who is relatively new to the industry, she just works solely with me. She worked as my acting producer and assistant director, which helped out. Aaron Russell, my brother, was the executive producer of the show. So he just made sure everything was going smooth and helped fund the film. And then the rest of the crew is pretty much made up of friends from Bowling Green and friends from home that helped put it together. They've been with me since the beginning. We shot on the Panasonic AF100, and what attracted me to the camera was the fact that we could, you know, use prime lenses. I had just worked on a film in December that was shooting in Columbus, and we were outside the entire time. So it was an absolute freezing experience. So I was somewhat weathered to brave the cold of my film in February. A little bit less cold than December, but we shot, I would say, about 20% of the movie outside. And it was cold, but we didn't stay out too long, so we were able to weather it pretty well. And the heat in the sorority house was spotty at best, but the biggest challenge, especially in Ohio, I think, making films, is just to get every location and everything on board, to understand kind of what you're doing. basically organizing a film in Ohio is kind of difficult just because it's not Los Angeles. Not everyone knows what goes into making a movie. So we would roll into a location, and even though we'd had a conversation of what they should expect, they still, you know, they get really, oh my gosh, I didn't know you had this much gear, I didn't know you were bringing in this kind of people, and we said, well, we kind of told you that. That's sort of the hardest issue, I think, is dealing with the awareness of filmmaking in Ohio, that it actually does exist. Convincing people that, yes, you can make a higher quality film in such a small area like Columbus or Springfield. Films are being shot here all the time. One of the other bigger obstacles was finding the cast. We had an enormous cast of 20+ people. Finding talent, especially all locally, was difficult. The film is based around a sorority house, and so there was 6-7 girls that needed to be cast for these parts, and they were relatively large roles. Filmmaking in Ohio it's got its pluses and minuses for sure. I think as far as being able to do things on a low budget scale, you couldn't really do that in many other places like you can in Ohio. If you basically were working in a larger city or in a larger market, things like locations and crew and talent, everything would be just, you know, astronomical. But working in a smaller area like Columbus is always nice. You can find crew that's very eager to get started and work, and they're very talented. You can find talent that's also really talented that is just looking to get out there and basically be in a film, be in a project. And so that's always a plus that you can find. And I think Ohio has a lot of that to offer. Cleveland is striving more now with their film commission. They're striving more to bring in bigger films and help filmmakers out. Columbus feels like it's kind of doesn't really have that safety net or that help that Cleveland might have now. So it would be nice to have a really strong centralized film commission that worked with the independent film market and with independent filmmakers to help their projects get off the ground. After the screening of The Sleeper, it was an extremely positive experience. I think it went over very well. I could be a little bit more happy with the film, but of course on a low budget you try to do the best you can, and obviously things fall through the cracks, and I could see it on the screen. And I think after the screening I went and re-edited about 4 minutes out of it and made it a little bit stronger, but overall after the screening I could see that it was definitely a film that worked. I was really pleased with the screening. Coming up in early September, I'm going to be shooting a first part of an anthology film that I'm working on with a new producer. We're going to shoot a 4-part horror anthology film, and it will basically be taking place over the course of the next 6 months. My first film is coming out on DVD on August 16th. It's called Death Stop Holocaust, and it is found on Amazon and Walmart, and hopefully soon to be on Netflix. My advice as an independent filmmaker is always just to make something. I hear a lot of filmmakers that talk about wanting to do a project, and oh, if I only had the money to do this project and that. With technology the way it is now, it's available to you relatively cheap. There's always a friend that has a camera or a friend that has an editing system, and my best advice is to go out and just do it. Just make a project. Because you'll sit around and you'll talk about it for years and years to come, and if you don't go out and do it, you'll never learn from anything, and you'll never be able to work towards anything else.
Framelines is brought to you in part by Sabo Studios, gear for the show. Tape Central, providing your media needs. Production Partners Media, affordable media solutions. And by grants from the Greater Columbus Arts Council and the Ohio Arts Council.